Hello everyone, and a very warm welcome to today's Sage 50 P11D webinar on year-end for 2022 to 23. My name's Duncan, I'm your host and presenter, and we are joined today by my colleagues Calvin and Louise, who are standing by in the background, ready to answer any of your questions. Let's now take a look at what I'm going to cover in the webinar today. So we're going to start with a brief introduction to reporting, expenses and benefits, and also a run through of your P11D key dates. We're then going to walk you through installing your update, providing some top tips for a smooth installation of version 28. And we'll be explaining how you can install this in a separate folder to version 27, which will give you access to your old data should you ever need to get into that without overwriting it. And I'll run through what's new for 2022-23, including an important legislation change. We'll then take a look at using P11D and entering benefit details. So we're going to cover briefly importing records from Sage 50 Payroll, which is a useful way of getting up and running if you're using the software for the first time. And we'll also take a look at entering benefit records directly into P11D and how to navigate the software. And then we're going to take a look at the year-end process. So we'll have a look at all of the steps for preparing for year-end, producing your P11D and P11DB, and then submitting your year-end return online using the new improved Internet Submissions module. So all of this should take approximately 45 minutes, and we'll aim to stick around a little bit at the end as well to give you that chance to ask your questions. So as an employer, if you provide taxable expenses and benefits, you do have certain reporting duties to inform HMRC of these arrangements. And unless you've registered to payroll your benefits, this will take place after the end of the tax year via the P11D process. So what this involves is submitting a P11D form to HMRC for each of your employees who was provided with taxable expenses or benefits that were not payrolled, and that will summarise the value of those expenses for the 2022 to 23 tax year. Now, you will also need to submit an employer declaration known as a P11DB, which will report the Class 1A employer national insurance contributions that you owe on those benefits. And you will need to provide your employees with a copy of their P11D form. And I'll show you, you can print or email that from the Sage P11D software. Now, the alternative to doing this is known as payrolling. And this is where the benefit details are reported during the tax year by being processed as a benefit in kind pay element through your payroll. So this in effect creates a notional payment where the amount of tax on the benefit amount is deducted from the employee in the payroll and then submitted as part of the FPS. Now, if you are payrolling, you don't need to submit a P11D for each employee, but you must still submit the employer declaration, the P11DB, to report your Class 1A national insurance. But it is worth noting you must have registered with HMRC to payroll expenses or benefits before the start of the relevant tax year, so before the 6th of April. And it is not possible to payroll employer-provided accommodation or beneficial loans. Both of those benefits do need to be done following the P11D process. Now, just to be clear up front, we are covering P11D in today's webinar. We will not be covering payrolling. So if you have registered to payroll, most of this content will not be relevant to you. And we're going to be using the Sage 50 P11D software to help us do that. And you can actually read more about reporting expenses and benefits on the gov.uk website following the link there on the slide. So let's now take a look at some key P11D dates. And we've started this off with the 5th of April. That was the last day of the previous tax year, 2022 to 23. And on your P11D, you'll be reporting the expenses and benefits provided up to and including that date. So for the full 2022 to 23 tax year. And that was also the deadline to register to payroll benefits if that's something you wanted to do in the current tax year, 2023 to 24. The next key date on our timeline is the 22nd of May. So this was when we released version 28 of Sage 50 P11D, and that contains all of the legislation updates for the 2022 to 23 tax year, and the new internet submissions module for you to be able to submit your year-end return for that tax year. And we'll be covering the installation process in a few moments' time. We've then got a few weeks until our next deadlines. So the 6th of July is the main deadline. This is the date by which you must have submitted your P11D and P11DB forms to HMRC. And remember, that must be done online. And also to provide the P11D to your employees. And then the other July deadline is the payment deadline for your Class 1A National Insurance contributions. They need to be paid by the 22nd of July or the 19th of July if you pay these by cheque. So we've got a bit of time before those deadlines. It's always good to get a bit of a head start and get prepared to make sure you're all ready to do this submission and get this done before those deadlines. So we're going to move on now and talk about installing the update. So this was released this week, 22nd of May, that was first released. And we're going to start with a few steps to help you prepare for a smooth installation. Now, in this part of the demo, we're going to explain how to install P11D into a new folder. And the main reason that we recommend that you do that is that it means that you keep access to your old version of P11D. So you've got some historical data you can look at for previous tax years, and it means that we're creating a new set of data for version 28, and you will be restoring your existing backup. So to prepare for this, you will need to check where your current program is installed. So check your program directory. You'll need to make a note of your serial number and activation key, because you'll need to enter these details when we activate version 28. Strongly recommend that you run a compact and repair, which will do some maintenance on your database and hopefully avoid any issues when that data is converted. And importantly, you need a backup of your version 27 data that you can then restore into version 28. And I'm going to run you through these steps, or some of these steps, in a quick demo. So I'm just going to bring the slides down, and you'll see right now that I am logged into my version 27 of P11D. And first of all, I'm going to show you where you can find your serial number and activation key, and also check your program directory. So to find this information, log into version 27 and click the Help menu here at the top of the screen. If you then come down to About, on the system information, you'll see here your serial number and activation key. So you'll need to make a note of that. And here on the system information tab, I should say, if you choose application on the left-hand side, you need to make a note of the value alongside P11D. Now, you might not see the full path, so you can either resize the window or you can hover over it with your mouse, and you need to make a note of the path up to p11d.exe. So excluding that end bit, my program is installed into C:/program files x86/sage 50 P11D. So actually my current version is installed in the default location, and I'm going to explain how you change that when you install version 28 so that you can then access last year's version and this year's version at any time you need to. So you've noted your serial number and key and the program directory. Next up is the Compact and Repair tool. So this can be found from the File menu. Click onto File and then click Compact and Repair. You'll see a confirmation message. So it will contact your data and repair if necessary. It could take a minute or two, depending on the size of your database and where it is located. So please be patient at this point. When you click OK, wait for it to complete. And when it has completed, you'll see the following confirmation message. And once you've done that, you can then take a copy of your version 27 data, a backup, which will then be used to restore into version 28. So to take the backup, go to the File menu and then click Backup, which takes you into the Backup wizard. If you click onto Next and back up your data files, click Next again, and then you can browse to choose a suitable location for your backup. So I'm going to keep mine on the desktop. I'm going to call it V27 P11D data. I'm then going to save that backup file and complete the backup wizard. So once that's successful, you'll see this message on screen, and then you are then ready to download and install version 28. So I'm just going to close out of version 27, and we'll just pop back to the slides. So that's your preparation steps. These are all documented in our help article as well, which is linked to on the screen. And then your next step is to download and install the update. So you will need to download an installation file from our website. So you should have received an email recently about this with a link to the download, and it's also available via the link on this slide. You must be logged onto your computer as an administrator, which will give you permissions to install software. And we strongly recommend that rather than installing over the top of your existing version, you install version 28 into a new folder. So the way that you do this, once you've launched the installation, is you'll be presented with the destination folder for the install, and that will usually show the default directory, C program files x86/sage50 P11D. What you can then do is you can click on this browse button, and then you can click into the path just up here, and we would recommend that you add V28 to the end of the folder name. And then when you click OK, that will change your destination path, and that will then install into a separate directory. So you would then allow the installation to complete. You'll be prompted to restart your computer. And once you've done that, you're ready to activate version 28 and restore your backup. So following the install, you should have a new shortcut on your desktop. So it looks something like this. It'll be called Sage50 P11D V28. When you launch it for the first time, because you installed in a new folder, you'll be asked for your serial number and activation key. So enter the details you made a note of earlier. And then because we'll be restoring a backup, we are going to create new data, and then we're going to then restore over the top. So choose that top option to create new data, and then complete the startup wizard, which will then prompt you to log in to a blank company. And then following this, your next steps are to restore the backup from version 27, upgrade the data, and recalculate your figures, which is what I'm going to show you in the next demo. So we're now picking up the demo from the point we left off. You can see this is the backup that I've just taken from version 27. So I'm going to launch into version 28, and I've already gone through the startup wizard, and I've created my blank company. Now remember, this is a blank company at the moment, so if you do have a password for your existing P11D data, you won't need to enter it at this stage. You'll only need to enter it when you restore your backup. So for the blank company, the password is blank. I'm just going to click login, and you can see this takes us into the program, but we don't have any employer or employee record set up because we're going to be restoring our backup. Now the way that you do that is you click onto the File menu, and then you come down to Restore, which takes you into the Restore wizard. You would click onto Next, and then you can use the Browse option to locate the backup that you've just taken. So mine was this one here, V27 P11D data. Once it's selected, click onto Next. We're restoring our data files, so we'll click Next again. And if I then click Finish, that then restores the backup, and it prompts you to upgrade the data. So we're going to go ahead and upgrade the data now by clicking Yes, which launches the Upgrade Data wizard, and simply follow the steps, clicking Next, waiting for the progress bars to move across. You can view the update log if required, and then click Finish, and then you'll be prompted to recalculate your figures. So just click OK to that message. Again, you should see a progress bar move across. That has now completed successfully for my demo. And then I will be prompted to log in. And at this point, if you do have a password, that's when you would enter your password, and you would click Login to get into your data. So we have now restored our version 27 data into version 28. And as you can see, we've got my employer listed here, and I've got a list of employees here in the main screen. So hopefully that gives you a good idea on how to install in a new folder. All of these steps are available in our Help Center as well, so do follow the link at the bottom of this slide. So a quick look now at what's new for 2022 to 23. So new in version 28 is all around updates to the legislation. So there is an updated Class 1A national insurance rate of 14.53%. Now, the reason for this was in 2022 to 23, the government introduced the Health and Social Care Levy, which increased the rate of employer national insurance and then withdrew it again in November, mid-tax year. So what they've done for the Class 1A rate is they've annualized that percentage based on the different rates that were in force over the course of the year. And your Class 1A NIC for this tax year will be 14.53%. And of course, that will return back to 13.8% in 2023 to 24. Also got updated company car, fuel and company vans rates, fuel scale charges, mileage advisory rates and statutory reports. And what you'll see a little bit later on is our updated internet submissions process. So for the first time, you'll be able to store your government gateway details, and it'll bring it in line with the submission process that you may be used to in Sage 50 Payroll. Now, a key legislation change with effect from the 6th of April is that paper submissions are no longer accepted by HMRC for your P11D return. So P11Ds and P11DB must be submitted either using commercial software such as Sage 50 P11D or HMRC's PAYE online service. Now, the same rule applies to corrections, but you won't be able to submit a correction via your software. So if you do discover a mistake after you've done your submission, that correction must also be submitted online, but using HMRC's PAYE online service. However, paper P11Ds provided to employees are still allowed. So you can still give them a paper copy or an email version if you prefer from the software. And you can read more about that legislation change in the latest edition of the Employer Bulletin, which I've linked to on the slide. So that really covers off the update. What we're going to move on to next is entering the benefit details. Now, this is something that many of you will have been doing throughout the year as you've provided the benefits to your employees. But some of you might be new to P11D, so I thought I'd give you a quick overview on how the record keeping works. So within your P11D software, there are three types of records. You have employer records, where you would store all of your employer details. And this is also the section you would come to when you complete your employer declaration. And if required, you can have multiple employers within your P11D database. You then have employee records containing all of the employee details. And you have benefit records with the details of benefits that you have provided to the employees. Now, there's a whole range of different types of benefits. Some of them are pretty straightforward, where it's just the value of the benefit that is entered. But some types of benefits do involve quite complex calculations. And this is where your P11D software comes into play, as it will do all the calculations for you based on the information you've entered within that record. So we will have a quick look at entering the records in the software in the demo, but you can read more about all of this on our support hub at sage.co.uk/P11D support. What I'll also mention is it is possible to import some of this information from Sage 50 Payroll. So if you currently use Payroll and you're perhaps using P11D for the first time, or if you know that you've taken on new employees that you haven't yet set up in P11D, but have been set up in Payroll, it would be possible to import employer details, employee records, and also company car and fuel records and beneficial loans that have been processed in your payroll software. So this, of course, is completely optional. You don't have to import anything from Payroll. You could create it all manually in P11D. But I do want to show you the import wizard and the type of information that can be brought in from Payroll if you wanted to do that. So let's go into another demo. And what I'll do, because we're going to do an import first, is I'll bring up my payroll software. So this is the same company, but within the payroll. And what I've got set up in here are some employee records, as you can see. And for one of my employees, I've actually added a company car record. So this has already been added into payroll, and it can be imported into P11D. And the other benefit type you can import from payroll are beneficial loans. So if I just take you to the pay element settings in my payroll and here onto the loans tab, if you do provide a beneficial loan that's being repaid through payroll, there is an option to transfer the information to Sage P11D, which I have selected in this case. And I do currently have one employee receiving that loan, or who had received that loan, and they're repaying it. And you can see within their pay elements, they've got the loan amount and the amount that's been repaid over the year. So those records can also be imported from payroll. Now, if you are going to do an import, you need to know where your payroll database is stored. So make a note of this path at the bottom of the screen just here. And you will need your payroll program closed in order to do an import. Now, another top tip, do make sure you've got a backup of your P11D data before you import anything. So I've got a backup, I've just restored it. So I'm going to do the import from the File menu. So if I go to File and Data Import, there is an option here to import Sage Payroll data, and I can then work through the import wizard. So you can either search various drives for Sage Payroll databases, but because I've noted the path, I'm going to click onto Browse, and then I'm going to browse to my payroll.mdb file, which is actually in the default data location in this particular example. That's then going to display the employer name, the PAYE reference, which I've just selected, and then it will show me the employee records that I could import into P11D. Now, obviously, I'm dealing with existing data, so any import that I do will update the existing records, or if there were new employees, it would create the new employee records in P11D. So you can either choose specific employees that you want to bring in by holding the Control key and then clicking on the employee names. You could select all by clicking Clear and then Swap. Or there is a tick box to only import employees with benefits, but remember that would only be the company car or beneficial loan benefits that you've set up in payroll. So for any other benefit type, if you want to create the employee record and then add the benefit in P11D, this is the way that you could import the employee record. So I've highlighted everyone. I'm just going to go to Next, and it's detected that we already have this PAYE reference set up in our P11D database. So in this case, I do want to update the employer. It then completes the data import, gives me a log of what has been imported or updated. So we've got some loan transactions here. We had a company car, and then it will recalculate the imported benefits. So that's complete. I'm not going to import any more data. That just makes sure I've got the latest changes from my payroll imported. So you don't have to do it that way. You can create your records directly in P11D. So to give you a few tips on navigation, you've got all of the options here on the left-hand side. So it starts with the benefit records that you can create, which we're going to come back to. You've then got a section for employee records. So you can set up new employees from here if you decide not to import them. And then we've got our employer records. And this is also we're going to come back to later to complete our employer's declaration. And a new area in version 28, all about internet submissions. So taking a look at the existing information that I have, there are a couple of employees where I've entered benefit details. So I'm going to start by selecting employee 1. And what you can then see is the linked benefits are shown underneath. So we can double click to view more information if we wish to. It's worked out the P11D cost, and in this case, the fuel scale charge for the car. And it works out exactly which section on the P11D that this information should go. And if you click onto P11D View, here at the bottom, you get a preview of that individual's P11D form. So you can see this is starting to build up with the company car detail and the fuel scale charge for this particular vehicle. We've got something similar for employee 4. So this again was imported from Payroll. It's a beneficial loan record. So you can add any additional information that you might need to add, such as interest paid. And the calculation is done based on the various balances and the interest rates in the legislation. And then we've got the P11D cost again calculated for us and showing in the relevant section on the P11D view. So that's 2 that I've already set up. Let's add a couple of benefit records to another employee. So I'm going to select employee 2 here on my list. And then from this benefits section, you would look through the different categories to find the type of benefit that you want to record. So quite a few categories to view here. And if you can't see the one that you're looking for, it will often fall under miscellaneous benefits. But for this particular employee, I'm going to add a company car record. So I'm going to select company cars. And what I can then do is I can just go ahead and fill in the details like so. So some of the information is mandatory. Anything in blue is a mandatory field. I'm just going to put some of the details in here. Registration date of the car. And then the dates available if it hasn't been available for the full tax year. So if it was provided after the start of the tax year, you need to put the date available in. If it's been withdrawn during the tax year, you put the date no longer available. But in this case, it has been available for the full year, so I'm not going to bother filling in those fields. On the benefit tab then, we can just fill in the rest of the details. So this is going to be used to do the calculations. So list price and a percentage based on the CO2 emissions is essentially how it works. And then if private fuel was provided, we've got a tick box for that here at the bottom. You can also add your own notes if you wish to, which will appear on the various benefit reports. And if I go ahead and save this car, you can see that that car record has now been created. Just like so. Let's do another benefit type. Quite a common one is private health insurance. So I'm going to add some medical insurance for this particular employee. So this one's a bit more simple. There's not many calculations involved. We just need to provide the commencement date and, if applicable, cessation date if it's been withdrawn. And actually for this benefit, it was provided midway through the tax year on the 1st of September. So by putting that commencement date in, it will automatically adjust the P11D cost by showing the number of days in insurance period. So we still record the annual amount of the benefit, which in this case, £250. We can add any notes if we wish to. And then if I click on to save, you can see it's worked out the cash equivalent and the P11D cost, and that is prorated based on the annual amount and the days it has been available. And again, that all appears on the P11D in the relevant section. So we've got our car, and we've got our medical insurance, and there are associated benefit reports with all the different benefit types. So these could be ran individually. A quick way of doing it is to right-click the benefit, preview the benefit report. And this is something that you might consider doing once you've entered all of the benefits, just so you've got some reports to check that information. So let's just return to the slides because we're going to move on to the year-end process. So we've had a quick look there at how to record the benefit details in the software, and hopefully a lot of you have already done that. We're now going to think about the year-end process, which we've broken down into 5 stages. For the purposes of this demo. So the first 3 steps we're going to go through is a bit of preparation. So step number 1 is to check your version and just be sure that you've installed version 28. Step 2 is to check your benefit details. So make sure you've entered all the benefit information. You can recalculate the benefits. You can also run those benefit reports to have a check through. If you're happy with everything, take a backup at this point. Can't have enough backups. And then you can move on to the year-end steps, which is producing the P11D forms and the employer declaration, P11DB. And if you're happy with everything, do make sure you've checked everything and you are happy, you can then submit to HMRC. And you just get the one chance to submit through your software. If you realise you've made a mistake after that, any amendments will need to be done via HMRC's PAYE online service. Now, again, we've provided a link to more information on this process, but let's have a quick look at some of these steps in the demo. So we'll start with checking the version. It's really easy to do. If you have a look at the top of your screen, it should say P11D, and then in this case, version 28. And in the bottom right-hand corner, it shows the tax year. So this is for tax year 2022 to 23. So we are definitely on the correct version. We can then check our benefit details. So at this point, you might consider running some reports for the benefit types that you provide. So I've clicked clear and swap to highlight everyone. I can then go into the reports option, and you'll see there is a benefit report for the different types of each benefit. So I could do them for company cars, for example. This is going to show me all of the company car records that have been set up. And I know I had some medical insurance as well. So we could run the medical insurance benefit report. So have a look through those reports, and that gives you a way of checking the information that you have entered is correct. The other thing that we recommend at this stage is recalculating the benefits. So if you go to the employer menu at the top here, you can update the employer calculations by recalculating the benefits. You can see there all of my figures are up to date. And if you're happy that everything for the tax year 2022 to 23 has been entered correctly, at this stage, we would recommend taking a backup. So a reminder of these steps, we did this earlier, go to File and then Backup, work through the backup wizard, select Browse to choose a suitable location. So V8, P11D, year end, I'm going to call this one. And then we've got a point to restore back to should we need to in the future. So those are the preparation steps. And then we can move on to the year-end process, which is producing these forms and then doing our submission. So P11D is the form that you'll need to give to your employees. And this information will also be submitted to HMRC when you do the internet submission. And you've got two different formats that you can use. You can either print your P11D forms, and you do that directly onto plain paper. There's no stationery required. Or you can choose to email the P11D, and it will email it as a password protected attachment where the employee's national insurance number is their password. Once you've produced the P11Ds, if you're happy with everything, you should complete your employer declaration, and you can print a copy of the P11DB that you'll be submitting to HMRC. And we also recommend that you check the Class 1A national insurance contributions that will appear on that employer declaration. So we'll work through these couple of steps in the demo just to show you how it works. Now, just to make you aware, there's only 3 of my employees that actually have benefit records. So when I produce the P11D, it will only produce 3 of them. The reason for that is I imported all of my employees from Payroll, but only some of them actually receive the benefits. So if I click onto Swap and go into my Reports option, these are still employee reports. And if I scroll down, this is where we'll find the 2 P11D layouts. So this one is the printed version, and the one that says -email is the one that will be emailed. So if I select the printed version, I'm going to do a preview, and that will then show me the P11D forms for each of my employees, and it will be ordered alphabetically by surname. So this is my P11D for employee 4, who had the beneficial loan. We can keep scrolling through, see some company car information. and the medical benefit for this employee as well. So if we're printing them, print them onto plain paper. You might want your own copy just for reference, and a quick way of doing that is to export it as a PDF. So I'm just going to click export. I'm going to call this P11D 2023. And that way I've got an easily accessible copy of the P11D forms that I can check or refer back to in the future. Now, there is also an email version. So this creates an attachment to individual emails, usually in Microsoft Outlook, unless you've entered webmail settings, and that can then be sent to your employees via email. So those are the P11D forms. You can read more about emailing from our support article. So do follow the link on the handout. Let's have a look at the employer declaration next. So we can access this either from the employer tasks here on the left-hand side, so this employer's declaration at the bottom, or from the employer option on the menu bar. We've got the P11D declaration from here as well. It takes you to the same place. And all you need to do here is to fill in your declaration. So I am confirming that the details of expenses, benefits, and payments are enclosed and all details are correct and complete. So this is the option you would need to select. The capacity in which you are signing this. So let's say I am the managing director. And then here on the adjustments tab, this is where you will see the total of your benefits liable to class 1A. There is a section where you can enter adjustments, so further additions and deductions, which I don't need to do in this case. And then you can see it's multiplied by the class 1A NIC's rate, that 14.53%, to give us our payment due by the 19th of July by check, or 22nd of July if you pay electronically. So you can save the declaration once you've completed it. You can print it directly from here if you want your own printed copy, or if you've saved it, you can also access this from reports. If you go to employer, you've got the employer's P11DB declaration. So I just wanted to show you what this looked like. So it's a copy of what you would have sent in the post in the past, but now this must be submitted online. In our case, it shows us the class 1A NICs payable, and then we've got the declaration just here. So maybe export that for your records. And if you're happy with all of that information, you are then ready to submit. So we've completed them steps. Let's move on to the submission. And there has been a change from version 27 where we've improved the internet submissions features in the software. So it is now possible for the first time to save your HMRC login details within eSubmission settings. And we also give you easy access to your submission log. So that's all within that new internet submission section there on the left-hand side of the screen. So let's take a look at where you enter those details, and we're going to submit our year-end return. So switch into the internet submissions area. I'm first going to go into my eSubmission settings, and this is where you will need to enter your user ID and password. So be careful when you enter this. Make sure you've entered it accurately and correctly, otherwise you will get an error during your submission. And then you put the contact details of the person making the submission and that person's email address. So that has all been entered for me. I can then click on to save, and it just means I won't have to re-enter that information next year when I do this, because it will be saved in my eSubmission settings. We then move on to do the submission. So submit P11D, P11DB just underneath. It does recommend that you back up your data. Now, nothing has changed since the last backup I took, so I'm not going to follow that prompt, but if you haven't taken a recent backup, we'd strongly recommend that you do that. You'll see the employer names. I just have the one. It says can submit yes, so you must complete the employer declaration first. If you haven't done your P11DB, you will not be able to submit. So we've got that highlighted. I would click on to continue. And then after a short delay, that will bring up the submission screen. So this should look familiar if you use Sage 50 Payroll. Now uses the same internet submissions module. So you can click continue, just double check you're happy with the gateway registration and company details. Click on to submit and it will show you the employees included in the submission along with your total Class 1A NIC payable. And then to make the submission, you go ahead and click submit. You'll then see your progress bar that moves across the screen. And once the submission is complete, you should see the confirmation message like so, which will contain a link to view and print your submission log. But that is now also stored within your software. So I'm going to close out. I've now submitted my year-end return for P11D. And if I take a look at the submission log, you can see that the same detail is there. And I can view the detailed information by clicking onto details here at the bottom. So that is the internet submission, slight change to the previous version. So some improvements to that process, hopefully familiar to a lot of you if you use our payroll software. Now, I will just touch on submission errors. All being well, things should go through straight away, but the most common error we're seeing from people that have attempted submissions so far is error 1046, which is an authentication failure. So if it fails pretty quickly, it is usually because of this error message. The supplied user credentials failed validation. And the reason they failed is that either the user ID or the password in your e-submissions settings are incorrect, or the PAYE reference entered in tax district / reference in the employer record is incorrect. So that's the 3 data fields you need to check. If you're not sure on the user ID and password, try logging in on the government gateway itself on gov.uk on the PAYE online service. If you've verified that that's correct, maybe delete and re-enter the information in your e-submission settings, check the employer record, delete and re-enter the tax district and reference, and then that should hopefully get you around that error. All other error codes are documented in the article available on this slide. So speaking of things that could go wrong, we are all only human after all, and if you do find after making your submission that a correction is required, please be aware that these corrections do need to be submitted online. Now, it is only possible to make 1 submission per PAYE reference per tax year from Sage 50 P11D. So if you've already done that 1 submission, to make a correction, correct the records in your software and print the relevant form. So print the P11D for any employee that you've corrected and the employer declaration, and then use those printed forms as a basis of submitting the information online via HMRC's PAYE online service. Now, we've written a support article all about this, and that also links off to the gov.uk support on doing these submissions. Touch wood, it won't be required for most of you, but if things do go wrong, there is a way to correct it. Just needs to be done via the web portal. And with that, that actually brings us to the end of the presentation. So I'm sure there's been plenty of questions come through, and we're going to stay online a few moments just to make sure we get out as many answers as we possibly can. While that's happening, I'd like to run through where you can find further support with your P11D software. So your one-stop shop for all of your P11D support is our online help centre. So make a note of this address, sage.co.uk/P11D support. We'll get you directly there. You'll find there's a support guide dedicated to year-end 2023. So you can follow all of the steps I've shown you today by reading our support guides. It will also host the latest downloads, so you can get your version 28 from there. And you can read other support guides, including how to enter benefit details. And if you need a helping hand, you'll find all of the contact details to get in touch with our support team. So that address again was sage.co.uk/P11D support. So like I say, we are going to stick around just to make sure that we have sent out as many answers as possible for you. I am going to go on to mute briefly, just to help out with those questions, see if anything common is coming through. Last chance to download a handout as well. If you'd like a copy of our presentation, just head along to that section on the right. And if you can send through your final questions right now, we'll do our very best to answer them. For anyone that is leaving now, thanks so much for joining us at the webinar. I hope you found this session useful. You will get a follow-up email which concludes a recording of the session today. So look out for that coming later today to your email. And you should see a survey as you exit the webinar as well. So if you wouldn't mind taking a moment to complete that survey, we do appreciate all of the feedback. We can only make these sessions better based on your feedback and comments. So please, if you can, take a moment to complete that. We would very much appreciate it. So I am just going to go on mute briefly, and I will come back when we are ready to close down the webinar. So I'll speak to you soon. Hello again, and thanks for sending those questions through. It looks like we've got through most of them, so do have a look through the questions section just to see those questions and answers. We are going to start to wrap things up as we don't seem to have had any new questions over the last few minutes. So a quick reminder, if you can, just take a moment to complete the short exit survey as you leave the webinar today. That would be much appreciated. And we will be sending through a follow-up email later today, which will include a link to watch a recording of today's webinar. So feel free to pass that on to any colleagues that might find this session useful. And we're running again in June. We've got a few sessions scheduled in June, so you can always sign up again for the next time we run this webinar. You find all the details on our support hub at sage.co.uk/P11D support. So I think that was the last question has just been answered there. So all that remains really is to thank you all for joining us at the webinar today. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and maybe look forward to seeing you on some of our other webinars soon. So from myself and the team, thank you and goodbye.